turned into a poem. Where are we? It was, here we are, yes. Possibly as a result of this focused activity, I was believed to be suffering from eye strain, so I was taken to an optician in Grimsby, 20 miles or so away. The drops inserted to open my pupils were not treated with an antidote at the end of the eye examination, in order, so I was told, to give my eyes a rest, and I suffered blurred vision for several hours until the effects of the drops wore off. A week or so later, I received my first glasses, round functional frames, and practical arms that clipped over the ears, nowadays considered a classic design. I thought them distinctly uncool, although that was a term that did not come into vogue until 5 decades or so later. I was embarrassed as I put them on for the first time in class, and was relieved when, after a year or so, I was told I no longer needed them. I preferred to be indoors to playing outside with my brother and our neighbours' children. This continued to provoke feelings of anxiety in my mother, who no doubt discussed it with the neighbours, and perhaps her sisters, whose own children were several years ahead of John and me in our life path. Bairns need fresh air, was the received wisdom, and so they do. A child should be running around, and exercise is certainly a good thing. Is growing pasty-faced, unlike other children, my brother with the roses in their cheeks. All this reading and writing would cause eye strain. Hadn't I, after all, been prescribed glasses for my eyes? It was determined that the family doctor should be consulted, so I was dragged along to his surgery and examined. There was evidently nothing physically ailing me at that stage. My brother and I had long recovered from whooping cough, German measles, mumps, chickenpox, and scarlet fever came later, but the doctor agreed that spending hours indoors was not good for me. Neither, of course, was it good for my mother to have a small child in the house tied to her apron strings when she was trying to clean, cook, prepare a fire, or tackle a mountain of ironing after a Tuesday morning's washing. The doctor's advice was uncompromising. Lock him out. And it sounded much more like an order. So my mother, always willing to bend to the authority of an expert, obeyed. On the following morning, with the sun shining brightly and my brother and the Pratt children happily running about the yard and garden, I was placed outside the back door and instructed to go and play. The door was securely locked. I had no intention of complying. Without sobbing or crying or even whining, I waited by the door. And I continued to wait. I explained to the curious Mrs. Jenkins, our neighbour, that I'd been locked out, and she sympathised with a knowing smile. After a quarter of an hour or so, my mother opened the door and put her head out to inquire about my condition. I had not moved, and I still had no interest in playing. I continued to wait. After an hour or so, my mother conceded defeat, invited me indoors, and let me return to my solitary pursuits. The experiment was never repeated so far as I recall. I was essentially bookish, not the outdoor type, and the family grew to live with the fact.